Othon
Recording in
represents
progress.
America. Um, America to William Blake was a place where, in the future, he perceived there would be racial equality and women would have equal rights. So he really was digging a lot of hope into what America could become, a place where the way that he saw the world um, would become the way that everyone saw the world. So the Daughters of Albion, Albion is an old word for England. The Daughters of England are looking across at Oothon and rooting for her and hearing her cries as she's tied to this man who defiled her through the entire thing. So, I might leave it there for William Blake. He is really something to wrap your head around. Unfortunately, where we're going next is every bit as visionary and prophetic. Well, nobody could be as prophetic as William Blake. But when Edward Burne-Jones tries to illustrate Chaucer, he ends up not really illustrating Chaucer, but creating something that's really powerful in its own right. So let's take a look at Edward Burne-Jones's attempt to illustrate Chaucer. So I just did a blog post and posted it yesterday on the Rosen blog. So if you want to read this story about how Edward Burne-Jones, who started out as this rebel, anti-establishment, pre-Raphaelite painter, the painters in England who were bucking the trend and bucking the academic establishment, he then becomes the pre-Raphaelite movement sort of becomes mainstream. Edward Burne-Jones becomes mainstream with it, and he becomes either the top or one of the top artists of the Victorian era. Full disclosure, he's my top favorite artist, along with Remedios Varo, the 20th century surrealist. So I love the guy, but that doesn't mean I can't see his limitations. William Morris, who created the Kelmscott Press in the last decade of his life after doing, as I suppose you probably know, everything, translating from Icelandic, creating the modern fantasy genre that Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and George R. R. Martin and everybody else works in. That was actually created in the books of William Morris, a passionate socialist who worked for workers' rights his entire life, also designed really terrific carpets, wallpaper, fabrics that you can still buy today. So this guy's amazing. Full disclosure, fair to say, he had inherited wealth. So that made him master of his own time. He made really good use of his time. But don't think to yourself, man, why can't I start a socialist movement and revitalize the decorative arts and create a new genre of literature? Why can't I do all that? You probably can't do it because you're not William Morris, and also because you might not have independent wealth to fuel your creativity with it. Morris did. The last book that Morris's press put out was the Kelmscott Chaucer, and it's not just the Canterbury Tales, although there are wonderful, wonderful illustrations by Burne-Jones of the Canterbury Tales. If you read my blog post, what you will come to understand is that it's only a partial picture of Chaucer that Edward Burne-Jones can bring himself to illustrate. Chaucer did classical, elevated, tragic, beautiful, beautiful, epic style poetry. He also wrote some of the dirtiest, raunchiest humor that I have ever read. Not just sexual, but full-on scatological. And the fact that he wrote this 700 years ago and it still gets a laugh is really impressive to me. It's also really impressive to me that he could do the really funky stuff, and then he could also do this incredibly moving, elevated poetry. So the Canterbury Tales have every single mood, every single moment that you can experience in life. I think it's a true panopticon of life. All that to say, it was not a panopticon for Edward Burne-Jones. Anything that was raunchy, anything that was sexual, scatological, Edward Burne-Jones would really prefer not to, which is puzzling to me. And I get into this if you read my blog post, because he did a lot of really funny doodles, and he also did some really sexual stuff. which we only have one drawing left of his really sexual work, but he didn't do it. So why couldn't you do something for Chaucer, Edward Burne-Jones? I don't know. What I wanted to look at in this program is the things in the in the Kelmscott Chaucer that are not the Canterbury Tales, because Chaucer wrote a lot of other stuff. And what we're seeing here is a really charming and almost kind of mystical illustration that Edward Burne-Jones did for a book that Chaucer wrote, or a pamphlet that Chaucer wrote, explaining how to use an astrolabe. And it's believed, maybe about 70%, we're sure, he wrote it for his son. So you can imagine this image is Chaucer demonstrating how the astrolabe works for his son. Chaucer, just an amazing poet. Also, well, as a working man, and also genuinely interested in science, and seems to have really understood the workings of the astrolabe. Let's take a look at this image a little bit bigger, because it is, I think, really charming. Look at that. So it's sweet. It's the father and his son. The son is grabbing onto the father's robe there. There's also kind of a mystical feel to it, right? It's going to get a lot more mystical, because another thing that Edward Burne-Jones did among his 87 illustrations that he did for the Kelmscott Chaucer, which is a gargantuan book, and I have to thank my colleague Kathy Chandler for taking these photos, because I'm sure it was a bear. We can't really use the Kelmscott Chaucer for live programs because very unusual for the Rosenbach. It's actually one of the few things that's a little too unwieldy, maybe a little too fragile for us to manage with people. So usually when I ask the librarian, can I use this? I 90% of the time get a yes. For this one, I get a no. So it's really fun to do a virtual program and get to share these amazing images with you. So there are 87 images. In addition to the treatise on the astrolabe and a translation that Chaucer did, and a beautiful poem about love, a really meaningful poem about Chaucer's devotion to the Virgin Mary, which is so interesting. It's so moving, and it's really interesting to read it because divines kind of take a licking in the Canterbury Tale. So it's interesting that though he was anti-clerical, as was such a big thing in the Middle Ages, he was also truly spiritual. So deep guy, that Chaucer. Anyway, in addition to the treatise on the astrolabe and the Canterbury Tales and the other things that he wrote, Chaucer also wrote a book called The House of Fame. And this is a book that Edward Burne-Jones can really get into. This is the moment in the House of Fame. The House of Fame is described as a dream. So we're still in that visionary realm where we started with Blake. When you're going to have a vision, when you're going to go on a quest, you need a guide, you need a helper, right? So an eagle comes down from the sky to kind of lead the pilgrim, the seeker, Chaucer, the narrator, to the vision, to enlightenment. Chaucer has a question that he's asked the universe, and that is, when I depict real people from the classical world or wherever, when I depict real people, am I doing a good job? Am I doing them justice? Is it okay? That's a question that writers are still asking themselves today. How much of someone else's life can I use in my prose before it's kind of icky? Chaucer, 700 years ago, is asking this exact same question. I love this image. It is maybe the top most spiritual image that I've seen in the Kelmscott Chaucer. The sun, the bird, the door, the desert. This is really mystical stuff. And I love that Burne-Jones, although he was kind of snooty about the body aspects of Chaucer, can really dive into the spiritual aspects. So though the Kelmscott Chaucer is not a full view of Chaucer by a long shot, there are lots of naughty bits of Chaucer that do not make it in. Although William Morris argued that they should, and that Burne-Jones should give it a try, Burne-Jones said no. However, Burne-Jones is really able to get the spiritual, otherworldly element of Chaucer. So what happens in the House of Fame is, toward the end, he's been and explored the House of Fame. The seeker, the narrator, continues on his journey, and he finds this extraordinary sight, which talk about prophetic. This, in my opinion, of all the glories and wonders of this incredible book, this Matterhorn of a book, this humongous 16-page, 560-page book of Chaucer, every single inch of it decorated. This is maybe my favorite, though it's really tough to say. But look at this. Burne-Jones is really influenced by a Japanese aesthetic, like almost everybody in the Victorian age was taking in ideas from Japan, from Japanese prints, became a really big craze. Almost nothing in his world has a shadow, but this place that you see, this big, giant, round house, this castle, this fortress that is woven together from twigs, it's never described as the House of Rumor, but that's what it is. And I think it's woven together with twigs because the air, the rumors, can flow in and out really easily. This is the greatest description because Chaucer describes it as spinning incredibly rapidly above the ground. You can see that Burne-Jones gives it a shadow, which, as I said, is really unusual in the world of the Kelmscott Chaucer. Usually shape is delineated by a line, as in a Japanese print. It's spinning incredibly rapidly, making a horrible noise, a horrible, loud, grating noise. The seeker, the narrator, goes inside and he sees all of these gossips and all of these news hounds, and they're all darting in and out of these doorways to listen or to tell on somebody. They seem to be of different moralities. Like some of them are pure gossips. Some of them are really genuinely interested in the news. But whatever it is, this place is the symbolic, prophetic center of being newsy and learning about the world and spreading gossip. One thing I got to say is Burne-Jones is more sexist than Chaucer, because if you look at all the newsy gossips in the House of Gossip, which is my word for it, that's what I'm calling it, they're all women, which is kind of creepy. It's kind of creepy that Burne-Jones is playing into a stereotype here, and it's not even in the original. Chaucer doesn't ever say that they were all women. So that's a choice made by Burne-Jones. So not such a good choice. Let's see if that's the end of what I put in for Burne-Jones Chaucer. Oh, this is a little bit more up close so that you can see this incredible, prophetic, surreal, creepy imagery, this overwhelming imagery that Burne-Jones has spun out of Chaucer. So, from the sublime to not the ridiculous, but maybe the slightly less sublime, but maybe not. We shall see. Lewis Carroll told the story of Alice in Wonderland to 3 kids who were the daughters of his boss at Oxford. He was a math instructor. He told them this story on a boat ride on the Thames, and Alice, the kid who kind of was the main character in the story, asked him to write it down. So he wrote it down for her. He did his own illustrations, and I think they're pretty okay in some cases. In some cases, not so much. This is one of Charles Dodgson, Lewis Carroll's original drawings for Alice. He hired and self-published the first edition of Alice. He hired John Tenniel, who was more of a political cartoonist. It's a strange story because he hires this political cartoonist. The political cartoonist does an amazing job. It's really hard to imagine the story of Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass without seeing the images from Tenniel. There are images in Tenniel that Lewis Carroll intended but didn't include in the book. He just told Tenniel. So it's a really interesting way of collaborating between author and illustrator. Some of the information that you get about the world of Alice in Wonderland comes from the drawings and has immediately became canonical and part of the story. So, bit of a strange story though, because after he has this terrific success and is a fantastic illustrator, John Tenniel then goes back to political satire and doesn't illustrate, I don't think he illustrates another book. kind of mysterious, kind of interesting. Maybe he just didn't like it. This is Tenniel's version of the same image that we saw a moment ago that is not owned by the Rosenbach, although Dr. Rosenbach did briefly own the original manuscript in 1928. He bought it for $15,400, sold it to the guy from Marcier Victor. It's a long story, beautiful story. Come to the Rosenbach, you'll hear it, because our guides love to tell it. So this is the drawing that John Tenniel did of that original image that originally Lewis Carroll did. So Alice has eaten from the wrong side of the mushroom. She's in the rabbit's house, and now she is gigantic. So this is one of the muddles that Alice gets herself into. The way that the original John Tenniel drawings came to the Rosenbach is Dr. Rosenbach met a Lady Swathing when he was in England in 1928 on one of his buying trips, and also it was also the trip where he bought the original manuscript with Lewis Carroll's drawings of Alice in Wonderland. Lady Swathing, it's actually really funny because in Dr. Rosenbach's biography it says that Lady Swathing apologized to Dr. Rosenbach that they hadn't been properly introduced. But would he please sell an edition of Through the Looking Glass, the sequel to Alice in Wonderland, that had included in it some original drawings of John Tenniel. So that's how these drawings came to be the possession of Dr. Rosenbach, and that's why they're at the Rosenbach today. And anytime anybody in the world does a museum exhibition of Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland, these things go on loan. They're constantly on loan, as you can imagine. So it's wonderful that this cultural treasure is right here in our city. Another drawing, and this is where we get into the spiritual element, which I did not intend to be a theme of this program. Nonetheless, there it is. I look at this, and having just done a lot of work on the Burne-Jones drawings for Chaucer's Canterbury Tales and all of Chaucer's works, and thinking of that House of Rumour, the spiritual element of it, the element of this seeker who's going into a new land to learn whatever she can about what lies beyond. This is that same image, right? This is that same image of going into a new world, meeting other strange beings that will maybe have something profound to tell you. Maybe they'll just have something silly to tell you. That's also profound. So I like that some of the images that we're looking at in today's program kind of connect in an unexpected way. Maybe my favorite, maybe the most triumphant, epic John Tenniel drawing at the Rosenbach is the Jabberwocky, the notorious, monstrous, terrifying, silly monster in the sequel to Alice in Wonderland, Through the Looking Glass. So here's another parallel. Actually, what Lewis Carroll wants to do is write a poem that makes fun of the craze that you can think of Keats writing La Belle Dame sans Merci. You can think of a multitude of other 19th century writers, Tennyson, writing these medieval, epic-y, romantic stories. So this early Lewis Carroll is a really funny guy. And among the things that he makes fun of that. And he writes this really funny pseudo-medieval poem with all kinds of goofy made-up words about a young man who goes out to slay this made-up, mythical, silly Jersey Devil kind of monster called the Jabberwock. And this is the first time that human eyes ever saw the Jabberwock, because this is the very first drawing ever done of the Jabberwock. So it should make Philadelphia a little bit weirder and a little bit creepier for you to think about that this is the home, Philly is the home of Lewis Carroll's original Jabberwock. So, staying in the realm of great children's literature, we're going to visit with Beatrix Potter. On one side of your screen is an image of Beatrix Potter. On the other side is an original drawing that Beatrix Potter did for her 1903 book called The Tailor of Gloucester. This book, this drawing in particular, is not at the Rosenbach. It's 1 mile north of the Rosenbach at our sister institution, the Free Library of Philadelphia. If you enjoy the Rosenbach and you just love exploring and learning about what we have, I'm going to recommend you have to go to the rare book department when they open again at the Parkway Central branch of the Free Library of Philadelphia, because it's kind of the through the looking glass version of the Rosenbach. Dr. Rosenbach's fingerprints are all over the rare book department of the Free Library of Philadelphia. It was Dr. Rosenbach who arranged to have a copies of the first, second, third, and fourth Shakespeare folio given to the rare book department at Parkway Central of the Free Library. Dr. Rosenbach gave his personal collection of early American children's books to the Parkway Central branch of the Free Library of Philadelphia, specifically to the rare book room. So if you like feeling Dr. Rosenbach looking over your shoulder at the Rosenbach, you're going to feel that way when you go to the rare book department at Parkway Central branch. And I see I have some messages here in chat. So let me say a little bit more about Beatrix Potter, and then we'll move on and take a look in the chat. So although we don't have the original drawings for the Tailor Gloucester, we do have a first edition. That's what we're going to look at next. And why don't I put that on pause, take a look at what you all have to say. Yes! Oh, Steve is on. So Steve knows all about. Steve is our local expert on Dr. Rosenbach and the Alice books. So he confirms that it was 15,400 English pounds, and adds that that would be approximately $75,000 at the time if you adjusted for today's inflation. Oh, this is really fun. It's great to see everybody's comments here in chat. Thank you so much for doing this, says Mitchell. You are most welcome. Burn Jones sorts of. Oh, Ed's put in my my link for my blog post. Thank you. Yeah, spends a lot of time on William Morris, which I might cut later, but then it gets into the Burn Jones, and you get to see some of the stunning images from the Kelmscott Chaucer. Thank you, Ed. So back to, it looks like James shows the Martello Tower from the opening. Yeah, you're right. That House of Rumor does look exactly like the Martello Tower, which is actually kind of fitting when you think about it. Interesting. Or a Scottish brioche, says Roz. I would much rather have Scottish brioche than a big, giant, incredibly loud, spinning house of wicker full of gossips. So I'm with you on that, Roz. All right, so let's take a look at some more Beatrix Potter. One last word about the Beatrix Potter collection at Parkway Central. They have a first edition of Peter Rabbit. They have original manuscripts not only for Tailor of Gloucester, but also for my favorite, The Tale of Little Pig Robinson, which I think is Beatrix Potter's masterpiece. So probably either one of or the best collection of Beatrix Potter outside of England, also right here in Philadelphia. Let's take a look at some of the work that Beatrix Potter did in the Rosenbach's first edition, 1903, of Beatrix Potter. This is probably the, the central image for Tailor of Gloucester. The story of Tailor of Gloucester, an older tailor in the 18th century, in the 1700s, he gets a commission to do a waistcoat, or we would say a waistcoat, for the mayor of London for his wedding. He sends his pet cat, Simpkin, out to get some twist so that he can thread the buttonholes. When Simpkin comes back with some food and with a twist, he sees that whereas he had imprisoned all the mice in the house under teacups, very clever way to deal with the mice in your house, just imprison them under teacups, the kindly old tailor has set all the mice free. So Simpkin's a good guy. He's looking out for the old tailor. He's out doing errands and such. But he has a traditional view of mice that cats tend to have. Certainly my cat does. So he's really irked that he's caught all these mice. The tailor has set them free, and so he holds back the twist to finish the buttonholes for the mayor's waistcoat, which would be a really important commission for this tailor, but he's just going to sulk and be mad about it. So because the mice are grateful to the tailor for freeing them from imprisonment under teacups, they complete the waistcoat themselves, and they do all the work, and they have enough twist that they've kind of connived around the way that mice do to get things. And they finish the waistcoat, except for one buttonhole, and they leave a little note that says, "Not enough twist." So this is actually based on a true story. Beatrix Potter was in her upper 30s, mid 30s at the time that she wrote this, at the time that she started her career as a writer. A young tailor in Gloucester, a little bit younger than Beatrix Potter, had a commission to do a waistcoat for the mayor for his wedding. And it was finished for him by surprise by his assistants. They finished all of it except for one buttonhole, and they left a little note and said, "No more twist." So this is, in a way, it's kind of a true story, but it wasn't grateful mice who were liberated from teacups. It was actual human beings, but still. The other thing that I want to say about this drawing is that we think of Beatrix Potter as an illustrator of nature. And I love the fact that when I look at a Beatrix Potter book, any flower, any weed that I see, that's a real weed. And that's a real flower. Beatrix Potter could tell you the Roman name and the properties of that plant. She really took working from life very seriously. In The Tailor of Gloucester, we see her depicting a urban scene, but we get to see other things, other amazing skills, amazing gifts that Beatrix Potter had that you might not notice if you're looking at one of the bucolic scenes. The other thing to say about this is that, as always with Beatrix Potter, she really wants to be true to life. So she actually went to museums and looked at old textiles in order to create the mayor's waistcoat for this book. I really hope that after this program, if you hadn't really taken Beatrix Potter seriously, I hope you take her a little bit more seriously. She has some pretty amazing feats as a conservationist, as a really good amateur mycologist, and I'm dying to talk about it right now. But let's focus on her just as an artist, and I think it's impressive enough. So look at these images of Simpkin going out to do the errands for the tailor on a winter's day. Look at how Beatrix Potter uses light and shadow. Look at how she creates this sense of a humongous, cavernous, maybe perilous environment for this very tiny cat. She's creating not her natural environment, but an urban environment. She's giving you the weather, the feel of it, and she's really making me feel that Simpkin's a brave little cat to go out by himself and get the food and get the twist, which then he doesn't give, for the tailor. I love that Beatrix Potter can excel at an urban environment just as she does at a natural environment. These are two images of the tailor going out, and I think they're a really interesting contrast. Maybe it's my imagination, but the tailor's going out by himself and leaning on a cane on the left. This building is leaning a little bit menacingly on one side. There's a huge shadow in the street. For me, the feeling of this is a little bit lonely and cold and desolate. But in the next image that you see, when Simpkin and the tailor go out together, light is coming from the shop windows. It's so similar to that original drawing, but it feels hopeful. I sense the friendship between the cat and the tailor. So the way that Beatrix Potter can use an environment, an urban environment that we're not used to seeing from her, that we don't associate with her, is a really interesting way to tell a story. This is really good illustration, in my opinion. Another thing to look at with Beatrix Potter is her gift for composition. You're going to think I'm crazy. This is one of the mice that has been liberated from underneath the teacup. Look at the angle that we're seeing her and the angle that she looks at us. The way that this table comes in from one direction, the mantelpiece, the fireplace is coming in from another direction. It's okay if you think I'm nuts, but when I look at this image, I see Degas. I see Beatrix Potter setting up a composition from an angle that's not what we would have expected, and making us see something that could be trite, could be very familiar. The teacup, the little dress on the mouse. She's making me see it in a new way. So not only can she express mood through weather, through the urban landscape, she's really good when it comes to composition. So it looks like Karen has raised her hand. Let's see what Karen has to say. No more twist. Yeah, I think I said not enough twist. Good job, Ross. Yes, that is correct. Ross says, I got this book when I was about 4 years old. I got to tell you, some of these Beatrix Potter books, I read them now. They are still good. Let's see if I can find that question. I don't see it. So if you would like to put that question into chat, I will see it there and I'll do my best to answer it. So let's see what else I can big up Beatrix Potter for. Oh, maybe that's it. It was so hard not to show you how Beatrix Potter uses light. And God help me, I was going to compare her to Vermeer. Yes, I was. I already compared her to Degas. I was going to compare her to Vermeer. I am fearless. But I just thought, they will probably have had enough hearing me talk about Beatrix Potter. So instead, let's talk about Henri Matisse's version of Ulysses, James Joyce's Ulysses. And if you've read Ulysses, if you've managed to get through it, you'll vividly remember the scene in Ulysses where the Cyclops get his eye stabbed out. Right? You remember that, right? No, because there's kind of a metaphorical Cyclops. There's no real Cyclops in Ulysses. And certainly nobody gets their eye stabbed out in Ulysses. Henri Matisse was asked to illustrate Ulysses for a limited edition version of Ulysses. I think there are about 500 that were made. Let me find my exact notes. Yeah, in 1935, it was made by the Limited Editions Club. What the Rosenbach has, sorry, it's 1500. What the Rosenbach has is number 1271 and also number 761. Number 761 is signed by Matisse. Number 1271 is signed by both James Joyce and Matisse. And I gotta wonder what James Joyce thought when he looked at these drawings, because they are not drawings of Ulysses. They are drawings of the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey. So Matisse kind of got it wrong, but Homer's Odyssey is a great book to illustrate. And he's Matisse. These drawings look beautiful. The drawings are really interesting, and I don't know that I have ever seen anything like it. Maybe some of you have. Let me see if we got another question in chat, because I did want to track down that other question. Mitchell asks a question. Who were the artists that Dr. R remembers seeing when he was a child reader? So one book that was huge for Dr. Rosenbach that he bought with his own money, he was out at Henkel's auction. This is another story that you'll hear on the Rosenbach Brothers tour, because our guides love telling the story. He was at Henkel's auction, a book auction in Philadelphia, and he saw a copy of the Tales of Reynard the Fox, and he wanted it. And I think he was about 12. He really wanted this copy of Reynard the Fox. He asked his uncle, Uncle Mo, who was also a book dealer. He asked Uncle Mo if Uncle Mo would buy it for him, just like my nieces do whenever I'm out with them. Like, I have to shell out for whatever. But I'm nice. I'm not like Uncle Mo, because Uncle Mo said, yeah, I'll buy it for you, but you got to pay me back, kid. So Dr. Rosenbach really treasured this edition of Reynard the Fox. That's the one book from Dr. Rosenbach's childhood that I know for sure Dr. Rosenbach really loved and really treasured. I'm going to take a guess here and go out on a limb, but it's not one of those bouncy limbs. It's a pretty sturdy limb. So Uncle Mo, the book dealer, he had a little shop on Commerce Street. There's great rumors that Edgar Allan Poe and Walt Whitman came to visit Uncle Mo. We don't know if they're true. They're great stories. But Uncle Mo really liked to hoard books more than actually selling them. So at the time that Uncle Mo died, he had a lot of really old books, including the earliest American children's books. And these books, really horrible stories from the Puritans about like the really good death that you can die if you're a good kid and the really horrible death that you can die if you're a bad kid. So not the sort of book we would ever give a kid today. But with these books around, I'm going to take a guess, going out on my limb here, that Dr. Rosenbach also read, in addition to Renyard the Fox, some early American children's literature. So I hope that answers your question, Mitchell. Let's take a look at this strange construction. And I haven't actually read that deeply into the whys and wherefores of this. But maybe if you know, or if you have a theory, you can include it in the chat. So this image is a super Matisseian, just lovely, flowing, moving image of the book that, or sorry, the ship that Odysseus takes to get back home after the Trojan War to get back to Ithaca. What's really interesting in this book, and like I said, maybe some of you will know why, will know more about this than I do. What's interesting is that there will be different sketches, usually a yellow, a blue, and then a white, bound into the book, which is sort of fun and funny and sort of hilarious because the book, remember, is still Ulysses. It's still about Stephen Dedalus and Leopold Bloom, and it's in modern day 1916 Dublin. It's not set in ancient Greece, but somehow it all works. Anyway, you'll see the the yellow image of the ship that Matisse has given us here. Then you'll see the blue image that he's done. You can see the oarsmen. You can see the people. You can see kind of this simplified image of the ship that almost, for me, expresses the movement of the ship more than the actual physical presence of the ship. And then this larger version where I'm guessing he's perfected his idea of how he wants to express the ship. I don't know, but it's a beautiful book. It's Matisse, but it's also kind of a funny book. So that, I thought, would be a good book to end on, except I promise you some Ernest Shepherd. This is a drawing by Ernest Shepherd that the Rosenbach has. We actually have two Ernest Shepherd drawings. We also have one of the King and Queen that A.A. Milne writes a poem about, how he just wants a little butter for his bread and butter at breakfast or something. Really cute poem. This one was given to Dr. Rosenbach in 1924 when he was on one of his collecting trips to England. It's an original drawing by Ernest Shepherd, kind of overshadowed by some of the amazing Alice stuff and the amazing stuff that the Rosenbach has. We don't really think about the cool A.A. Milne stuff that we have, but we have all of the original 4 first editions of A.A. Milne's Winnie-the-Pooh books and 2 books of poetry. We either have the first edition or we have kind of an upscale prestige volume that would have been produced at the same time. So whether that's technically a first edition or kind of an ancillary first edition, that would be a question for a librarian. But anyway, we do have some really fun A.A. Milne at the Rosenbach, some really fun Winnie-the-Pooh, including 2 original drawings by Ernest Shepherd, the artist of Winnie-the-Pooh, that were given to Dr. Rosenbach. What this poem depicts is called The Teddy Bear. If you've ever seen those Walt Disney versions of Winnie-the-Pooh or read Winnie-the-Pooh, you know that Winnie-the-Pooh can get really kind of fixated on diet. He sort of has a very unhealthy, body awareness. He really needs to kind of talk through some of his issues. So Winnie-the-Pooh is hanging around on the couch and the ottoman and just obsessing about the fact that you never hear a handsome guy described as fat. So finally he does read in the book that the King of France, King Louis the whatever, we don't ever know what king, is described as fat and handsome. And Winnie-the-Pooh is so excited when he reads this because he thinks, I can be fat and I can be handsome. So he looks out the window and he sees this older, heavyset man whom he decides is the King of France. And he tumbles out the window. He bows to the man whom he thinks is King Louis the whatever of France and says, "Are you the King of France?" And the poem doesn't say, but I suspect that this nice old banker, whoever he was, is just being kind and says to the little perplexed little bear, "Why, yes, I am the King of France." So the little bear is just utterly delighted with this, and it ends happily. So it's so sweet to think of Dr. Rosenbach in England on one of his collecting trips, meeting Ernest Shepherd and being given 2 original Ernest Shepherd drawings. So to wrap up, that brings us to the end of our program, Inside Iconic Illustrations, tonight. I hope that you all enjoyed it. We've seen the ways in which an illustrator can show you different aspects of the book, maybe highlight one particular aspect while ignoring others, maybe give you insights like John Tenniel that you can't find in the text, but nevertheless are canonical, come from the author. We've seen the way that Beatrix Potter can express the emotional bonds of characters through light and shadow and landscape. So I hope this has been an exciting view of some of the Rosenbach's collection of illustration, which as I dig more into it, I realize it's one of the most extraordinary and also one of the most complete. We have illustrations that go all the way back to early printing up through all the big names. And I really do think that it's one of the more complete collections at the Rosenbach. So I hope we can dig out more. And this is just like a taste. This is just a starter for what lies ahead for the Rosenbach. We are open. We have limited hours, Thursday through Sunday, but please do come and visit us. You can visit us in person. You can also visit us online, as you are now. We have wonderful collections highlights at rosenbach.org. You can check out our blog, which I frequently write for, and learn about Chaucer and Burne-Jones and William Morris. We have a Galway Gateway that will give you a peek into our collections that you can enjoy from home. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can come in person. We've done a little bit of more COVIDing, so we're masked up again. We've closed off the kind of squinchy little corners of the tour that would be really hard to socially distance. But you can still come. You can still come and see Dr. Rosenbach's library. You can see his brother Philip's Rosenbach vision of a beautiful life by exploring the Rosenbach brothers' house. You can come and talk to our librarian. You can make a research appointment. You can see one of our exhibits in person, or you can just explore the Rosenbach brothers' house with one of our wonderful guides. These are some pictures of our garden. Our garden, after 20 years, is reopened, so please do come and enjoy our garden. Very small, but magical nonetheless. It is the only garden left on our block, so we're quite proud of it and really glad to have it returned to its former glory. Since you came this evening for a free program, please do consider a membership or sending us a donation. You can see the link there on your screen, so please do send us a small donation if you enjoyed this evening's program. And that's it for me. Thanks so much for joining with us today and exploring the world of truly iconic illustrators. It was a great deal of fun for me, a great deal of fun to chat with all of you. I'll keep this on for a little bit so you can ask me questions in the chat. It looks like I have a few, but have a good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. I love the feet and the hands, Joe says, being warmed by the fireplace and the Potter picture with the mice. Yeah, I love those touches. I read that book and I feel like I know this Tailor. I feel like I know a little Simkin, the cat. They seem like good guys. Oh, and Roz is going to come to Sundays with Jane Eyre, which we're all looking forward to. You can also see information on our wonderful fall programs that we have lined up for you. Support the Rosenbach or become a member. So I'll sign off there. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you at the Rosenbach.